We are continuing our movement through the story of Jesus, his life, his ministry, his death, and resurrection, as told by the Apostle Matthew. We are at Matthew chapter 17 and verse 9. And I'm going to be reading from the Weymouth translation. Matthew chapter 17 and verse 9. As they were descending the mountain, Jesus laid a command on them. Tell no one, he said, of the sight you have seen till the Son of Man has risen from among the dead. The 3 disciples came down the mountain with Jesus. Jesus gave them a very direct command. Jesus understood what those 3 saw would not be understood rightly by others. I suspect that if they shared this type of thing to the religious leaders of that day, at that time, it would have created all sorts of problems. I think we can discern in this an important spiritual truth when it comes to the faith. I think we have to understand that as believers in Jesus Christ, as we walk in the faith as Christians, we have to understand that not all of what it goes on in our faith and in the life of faith will be understood by those who do not have faith. Yes, we have a responsibility when needed and appropriate to share our faith with them. But I don't think that's the same thing as saying that everything that is a part of our faith experience in life is fair game to share with non-believers. There are elements of that walk of faith which we should not share with those outside the faith. They simply will not understand it. Notice what Jesus links his experience on the mountain to. Jesus says, do not talk of what you have seen until I am raised from the dead. The disciples at this point must have been really, really confused. It was not self-evident to them that Jesus must be killed. Understand that when we read this passage, we know what's going to happen several chapters later in the Gospel of Matthew. And it wasn't like these disciples could flip forward in the playbook and get, oh yes, Jesus is going to be crucified. They were not thinking that way. Would not the 3 of them be thinking, after what they saw in the mountains, that Jesus was about to be revealed as a long-awaited Messiah? Would not the disciples see this event on the mountain as the first taste of a greater revelation of his glory? To talk to non-spiritual people of spiritual truth is frustrating, to say the least. Jesus was having trouble getting the disciples to see where his ministry was going. Never mind talking about his ministry to those that were dismissive of him. You give a non-Christian your story of your conversion, and your non-Christian friend will say, that is nice. Share with her that you feel the need to sell your home and enroll in seminary for ministerial preparation, and she is getting ready to call the mental health line for you. The point I'm making is not all that God speaks to you of what will be should be shared to people outside the faith. There is a point where we need to follow through with obedience to what God has shown us and allow the results to speak to others of what is going on in our life. I'm not saying there isn't a place for sharing our faith, but sometimes I think it's probably prudent and more prudent to just simply express in the general terms our faith, our call, and then go and do what God has called us to do and allow those results to speak to people. The disciples had seen something significant. The disciples were both ready and not ready to experience what they did. Yes, it was time for them to take a step forward in the faith. It was also the case they still had to grow in their understanding of who Jesus was to experience what they experienced. There will be times in our faith experience where we will see something which we will be better able to understand as we grow in grace and wisdom. You know, quite simply, my conversion experience at 17 is not understood in the same way as my conversion experience at 50. My conversion experience to the Christian faith was within a year also met by a call to Christian ministry. I now look back at my conversion in light of that later call. I understand that my conversion to the Christian faith was also wrapped up into a call to Christian ministry, that I could not be of faith and not serve that call. You see, the transfiguration of Jesus would help these three in time to better understand and appreciate the resurrection. In other words, one event linked to another event helps us to understand the first event and its significance and importance to us. The life of faith will bring events in our life by which future events make clear what we saw and experienced. The life of faith at times brings experiences that where we must wait for God in his time to make them make sense in us. Sometimes we simply go through. Now, I mean, it will not be a transfiguration experience, but we go through an experience, and then a later experience gives us the clarity we need. We need by faith in the interim to walk by faith and trust that he knows what he is doing.